Hi, everybody. This is Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with crypto profits. In this video, we're going to be finding out all about oracles. What are oracles? What have they got to do with DeFi? And why have projects like Chainlink, that is a oracle project, gone through the roof and exploded? And what's the potential for other oracle projects, including the one in particular that I'm going to be talking about, which improves upon Chainlink's oracle technology? Now, before I introduce him, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, CryptoRichYT, join my official Telegram group. And if you're watching this on YouTube, come over to BitTube. I post my videos on BitTube first, and this is because of YouTube's censorship and shadow banning. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe, click the notification bell, check. I mean, I'm getting the kind of views I was getting 3 years ago, despite my 17,000 plus subscribers. Buy over 50 cryptocurrencies with no fees whatsoever using crypto.com. Get a £50 bonus by using my link and signing up on the website. Hey, Robert, thank you so much for coming back. You and I, we spoke some time ago about Emurgo and their work with Cardano and particularly with Ergo. And I wanted to speak to you about oracles. Now, do you want to start by just giving a brief introduction to yourself and Emurgo, and then we'll start going into oracles?
Sure, sounds good. So hi there, I'm Robert Kornacki, head of research at Emurgo, and I'm also one of the board members at the Ergo Foundation. Emurgo is one of the companies that founded and built up Cardano to what it is today, and also is now a partner with the Ergo Foundation, and also does a bunch of enterprise work in the blockchain ecosystem as a whole. Okay. And so today I guess we're going to start tackling oracles. So did you want to start with what an oracle is? Or?
Yeah, well, one thing I want to say before we do that is Ergo is one of the projects that's a member of the Blockchain Privacy, Security and Adoption Alliance, which also includes Pirate Chain and Sentinel and stuff. And that's how I found out about Ergo. And I did a video recently about oracles and how Ergo's oracle pools is an improvement upon Chainlink's oracle. But I still had some questions about it. And as I said to you before we started recording, my background's in child protection social work. So what do I know about data stuff and coding and everything? So I wanted to ask questions to be able to understand it from a layperson's perspective. Right. So you tell me, first off, what is an oracle? What is meant by an oracle?
Right. So we have two worlds in blockchains. We have the on-chain world and the off-chain world. The on-chain world is where all the smart contracts live, and all the data there is pretty much accessible because it's on-chain. However, most of life, as we might know, is off-chain. And so data about the price of, let's say, Bitcoin or gold or whatever asset, that's developed based off of buys and sells in off-chain markets primarily. Mm-hmm. And so the price is, the accumulation of all these different buys and sells, what the price points of different exchanges are. And so this is a price that's external to the blockchain ecosystem itself. And so let's say we have Ergo and the cryptocurrency is ERG. What the price ERG to USD is on all of the different exchanges that sell it, that's not on the blockchain. And so we need some way to take the off-chain data, the price, and post it on-chain. And that's what an oracle is. In most cases, that's financial data of some regard or some sort of price feed. So you might have the price of gold to USD, the price of Bitcoin to USD, ERG to USD. But also in many more interesting use cases or different that aren't as common currently, but maybe in the future, you can do stuff like weather, for example. And so then you can have weather data, say in Chicago or in Toronto or in Singapore. And that weather data can be brought from the off-chain world, sourced maybe from a few weather stations, and posted by an oracle on-chain so then people could do, prediction markets. What's the weather going to be like in 10 days? Or maybe, on top of that, insurance, which some companies are starting to look into. And so a farmer can ensure that in 3 months, they won't have a rainy season, so if there's a drought. And so oracles can post the data, and then if the data says, oh, there was a drought, then the farmer gets paid based off of the blockchain insurance. But then if there wasn't a drought, because the oracle data said, hey, there was lots of rain, well, then the farmer doesn't get paid up. And so what oracles do is brings the real world onto the on-chain world, so we have access to the real-world data for smart contracts, and so we can start to do cool stuff on top.
Okay, and one example, listening to you that I thought of, and I just want to check it would fit, might be passenger flow or commuter traffic. Like if in the city of London or Toronto or Moscow or somewhere, they wanted to know, what times do people travel, what mode of transport do they use, when are the busiest periods, the least busy periods, and that data could be collected and then go into for off-chain, go into the blockchain through an oracle, and then could be used, I don't know, for city planning or something like that. Would that be an appropriate use?
So I guess in your example, theoretically, you could have a bunch of companies tried to bid for a project proposal, and they promised that their plan for maybe reformatting how the traffic flow goes, it's supposed to increase the speed of people getting to their work by 50% or something, because they have this amazing new idea for how to restructure London, for example. And so say they get the funding on chain, but then you take this Oracle data and you post that, hey, everyone actually has a worse time getting to work. And so your supposed plans for this amazing system, which we paid you 5 billion or whatever for on the blockchain, it failed. And then, you could have some clause that says, hey, we want a 50% refund because you suck at your job, even though we gave you all this money. So it's a very contrived example, but theoretically we could do all that kind of stuff on blockchains. And so that could be a use case.
So wherever data can be accumulated, amassed, and has some sort of value in the marketplace to be part of a smart contract, an oracle connects the off-chain with the on-chain world.
Precisely.
Okay, and that could also apply, I suppose, for the supply chain, maybe like for the movement of ships. So you're moving cargo across the Atlantic from the US to Europe and vice versa.
Yeah, and so you could have oracles for that kind of stuff as well. Some would argue that would be better suited for enterprise blockchains, which are more permissioned, because it depends on does everyone on Earth need to know that your cargo ship got from point A to B? Maybe yes, depending if it's very important. If it's not very important, maybe you could have a trusted set of nodes, and they would report on it on a not public blockchain, and so it's a lot cheaper. And so there's arguments to be had. Where's the best place to store this data? But you still need oracles or people who post data to a blockchain, whether it's permissioned or permissionless, and that's what oracles are for.
Right. Now, given Chainlink's very recent meteoric rise, I assume there's a lot of value that people have for oracles.
Yeah.
And that's because of, could you explain why? Why are oracles so valued?
So in the current craze of DeFi, primarily, oracles are vital because they provide pricing information about assets in the external world. And so why they're so crazy exciting for people right now is that everyone needs to use oracles, because billions and billions and billions of dollars in DeFi all rely on oracles. And so if your oracle solution sucks, all the DeFi projects that you see out there, they go to crazy millions in 1 week after launch for copy and pasting code and changing 18 lines. Yeah. Whether those are scams, Ponzi schemes, it's a great project, whatever your opinion is. If there's no oracles, you can't make those products. They rely on oracles because you need an external pricing data about what's the on those systems, Ethereum to USD price, or various other things. Stable coins like DAI or the whole MakerDAO project, that doesn't work if you don't have oracles. And so pretty much everything that's been developed in the last 2 or 3 years on top of Ethereum in smart contracts that's useful, they all rely on oracles. And that's why there's so much hype behind all this.
Right. And the one in particular, Chainlink, that I understand that's an ERC20 token.
Yes.
And so there'd be issues of gas fees. And then also there's something that if a particular project uses the Chainlink oracle, then payments need to be made in Chainlink. Could you explain that and address the issue of the gas fees?
Right. So Chainlink has a token called Link, and this link is required to be used for some parts of the system when oracles are being paid out. And for many people, there's how you could say obfuscation or abstraction. So people can pay in ETH, and then other people pay for you in Chainlink or in Link token. And so it's not as grading where every single person on Earth has to have Link. However, effectively, this is a token that doesn't have very much value, because what is the real use case? Whether I pay you an ETH or I pay someone else an ETH and they pay in Link, the token itself just becomes a hindrance that people use in order to have this big rise in price, at least in my opinion, in Chainlink's case, where no part of Chainlink requires for there to be a token. Some people argue it, and we can have discussions and talk about that. However, realistically, that's not the case. Other projects which look into oracles like UMA have a better argument for having a token. And so I'm not saying it's impossible to have a useful token for some oracle schemes, but what we need to do is use these tokens or collateral that we put in our oracle systems and have incentives and disincentives in place. Otherwise, the token is effectively just a barrier. And that's why, for example, with Chainlink, you may have seen an article a month ago, or maybe not, where there was an attack that the price of gas fees was so high for Ethereum, and the contracts were designed in such a way with this, Link token and the price calculations and everything, that oracles actually had their funds drained because people kept calling on them to produce data, but the price of gas fees for them to post the data on chain were higher than they were being paid. And because of all this Link conversion and the price calculations, they didn't even realize it. And so there was, I think, 900 ETH worth of 900 ETH drained from oracles by attackers because of this complex system. And no one noticed until after it happened. And it's just, it was an attack and it just sucked. And so now for us with Ergo and what we're going to be building in the future, we're looking at improving the system with what we've called oracle pools.
Oracle pools. So just before you go into oracle pools, one point I want to make, and I think I've got this one, so I'm not asking you about it, right? So using weather data, if we're going to have an oracle for weather data, what an oracle may do is just go to, I don't know, in the UK, the Met Office. We just can use the Met Office's data. But an oracle pool would go to many different sources of data, perhaps the UK Met Office, the European equivalent, the NASA, other different agencies and stuff. So it has lots and lots of sources of data, and so then any outliers kind of get ironed out. Is that accurate?
Yes and no.
So
oracles themselves can do just the same thing, right? It's not that hard to source from 27 different places. You average the data points out, and then you post that on chain. What oracle pools try to do, different than oracles, just in general, like a very basic centralized oracle, is that we have many people reporting the data, plus incentives and disincentives to make sure they don't lie and cheat. Why is that important? When you have $25 billion worth of DeFi relying on your oracle, it's not that hard to imagine someone would be willing to pay you off a little bit so then you can crash the prices so that they can make, 100x or something.
Right.
And so what we have is a problem of how do we guarantee not that the off-chain source is correct, so not that you just have 27 sources off-chain, but we also need to guarantee that the data that's sourced is actually from those 27 and averaged. And it's not just one person saying, I'm going to crash the price and put 1% of the actual price. And so that's what the point of oracle pools are, is to provide a lot of incentives, disincentives, and consensus between multiple oracles who all source from many different sources off-chain and then report that on-chain. And so then with all of these different factors, you start to have assurance, and you're even able to calculate the level of assurance with some basic mathematics.
Okay, so I get it about oracle pools and oracles. It's like oracle pools are pools of oracles, lots and lots of oracles. And then you can see, okay, that there's a disincentive for any of the oracles to cheat, because if they wanted to game it to make some money on the side in the way that Goldman Sachs might, with and did with Greece entry into the European Union. But moving on, it stops that. Okay, so then how does Ergo address the issues of oracles compared to Chainlink?
Right. So I guess I'll take one step back and explain for Chainlink. They have data feeds which act sort of like oracle pools, however, without a lot of the incentives and disincentives or consensus. And so how data feeds typically work in the Ethereum ecosystem with Chainlink is that you have a bunch of centralized companies, some company made a very popular DApp. They have millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they have some reputation. And so people say, hey, I trust you. And so when we take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these companies and we make them post data every hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, they then create a smart contract in the middle that sends requests to each of their oracles. Their oracles respond by posting to the blockchain, and then that smart contract takes all of their data points and then accumulates them, averages them more, as a median. And so that's how they work. However, this is kind of an ad hoc basis because all of your oracles are just separate entities. They have some slight incentives where they'll get paid slightly, but there's also no disincentives. So if the oracle isn't online, then it doesn't really matter because they got the money, and maybe some people will be angry with them, but there's no disincentives in place. There's no stake slashing. They've talked about stake slashing, and they've said in 2018, 2019, I remember reading, one day we have plans to add it, but that's not in place. And so it's cool you have a link token, which eventually will have use cases for that, eventually, hopefully, if they implement it. But today, that's not really the case. And so what we have for Ergo is we developed this model of oracle pools. And so oracle pools attempt to take a more serious approach at providing data feeds that anyone can create. That's another thing. With your typical data feeds, because they don't have incentives, disincentives, or consensus, with the Chainlink approach, with just a smart contract accumulating oracle data, what that means is you only have this centralized approach where you say, hey, you're a big company, you have a lot of money, I'll trust you. That's not really great for a decentralized ecosystem, right? We want to create a standard where anyone and everyone can rely on the oracle pools they trust and say, I don't trust these 6 big companies. Maybe 95% of people do, but maybe the 5% want to create their own oracle pool and have disincentives in place. So maybe we have a bunch of people who are anonymous and they want to source data, and maybe they have a lot of collateral, so they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. But they don't want to tell everyone who they are. Oracle pools will allow them to actually run their own pools and have that be decentralized. Because I don't know if you've heard, but eventually, 10 years ago, way back when, I've heard that Satoshi wanted to have a decentralized ecosystem and decentralized blockchains, and not just have big companies, taking everybody's money, having these big ICOs, crowd sales, tokens, liquidity mining, and it's just all centralized in big projects. I heard that maybe we wanted a decentralized future. And so having incentives, disincentives, and a method of people to agree, a consensus mechanism, is what allows anyone and everyone to run oracle pools. And as long as someone appreciates that you're sourcing data and they pay you for it, you have a business model to run an oracle pool. And that's one of the initial pushes for oracle pools, is to have this base framework where, yes, we can have much more trusted entities who also have these same disincentives, incentives, and consensus at play for running oracle pools that maybe DeFi worth billions of dollars use. But those are also, people like to trust big companies, but those can be bought out too. We've seen that in the real world. History has proven time and time again. And so for me personally, what was really important is to make this base that anyone and everyone can use, and we can also build on top of. And that's really what I set out when building oracle pools, from first principles and the first steps. And that's what we're building on top of Ergo. And so that's what we think is a better approach, is not having an arbitrary token that everyone has to use to pay. On Ergo, everyone uses Erg. And that means it's much easier, especially with the UTXO-based model. When you make a transaction, you can just create an extra output, and that pays the oracle pool. And so we can have a much better way where we can have the decentralization, but also have the big dApps in the ecosystem subsidize the important oracle pools, like let's say Erg to USD, and we can have it, almost like a unseeable tax, as some people see. So if you use a very big dApp that uses the Erg USD oracle pool, every time you use the dApp, 0.1% of your transaction might be sent to the oracle pool, and you don't have to feel it. It's just a very tiny sliver. And then if 10,000, 50,000 people all use that dApp, that money starts to add up, and we start to have this ecosystem building the important key oracle pools that everyone uses and hopefully trusts, but we still keep the decentralized core so anyone can run their Oracle pools. And if you don't want to use that Oracle pool, that's fine. You can create your own, find other people to create them. And so the idea is to keep decentralization and incentives and disincentives together as strong options and opportunities.
Right. Okay. And then what if there was an ERC20 or an Ethereum-based project that wanted to use the data from an Ergo Oracle pool? Is that possible?
So this is a question that actually comes up often. And I think what's important to clarify here is that transferring data from one blockchain to another is actually very complicated and expensive. And so what that means is that it's actually much easier for someone to recreate Oracle pools, write all the contracts and everything from the extended UTXO model and recreate it, or try to, in the account-based model and run Oracle pool in Ethereum. The reason why is that these are wildly different systems in Ergo and Ethereum. And so you can create proofs, but those would cost a lot of money to check. And so there is the ability in the future. We already have all the tech in place. It's just not really, the duct tape hasn't been tied together, so it's not usable right now. But you're not going to be paying like $100 to check a proof from the Ergo blockchain that someone, an Oracle pool submitted a data point on the Ethereum blockchain. It doesn't make sense to do this long transfer process, all this proof checking, all this data transfer, and with ETH gas fees, God knows how much that would cost too. So while it's possible, it's not practical.
Okay, so then what we want to happen, and I imagine it eventually will happen, is more and more DeFi applications being built on the Ergo blockchain.
Right. And so, that is essentially our goal, is to have a solid Oracle base. And we're continuously doing research into building on top of this. We're looking into already how to model the cost of corruption. So how much it would cost to pay out all of the oracles at minimum to source false data. And so we're trying to create a base that we can build all of this DeFi, like stablecoins, which is one of our next projects we're building on Ergo. And without this stable base, if someone crashes, buys out an oracle, well, people are going to lose millions of dollars, and that's horrible. And so what we really want to do, and that's what I think at the base, one of the strong points of Ergo is that it's somewhat conservative in its approach to how crazy and wild it wants to be. It doesn't want to just be like Ethereum, where there's projects that copy paste code and change 18 lines, and then suddenly, a month after it launches, someone finds that there's a mint function that the owner of the contract can mint as many coins as they want, which I believe one of the recent DeFi projects that was released had that. Or that it was designed so poorly that 3 days after its release, suddenly the whole thing halts because there's some sort of edge case where nothing can happen and the contract just fails. Ergo, as a community, we do not want that to happen. And so we're trying to create the most solid base possible, but we're also on the edge of many technological pushes. And so we have a lot of tech in regards to privacy preserving features and many other features that will be essential to DeFi and that will be completely and utterly unique, like being able to have stable coins that are mixed. And so no other blockchain in existence today has that. Or any other type of synthetic assets. So you could have an asset that tracks gold, for example, and then you can mix that. And then with the extended UTXO model, you also have the ability to pay for fees with a few smart contracts in between in just a stablecoin or just your gold synthetic assets. And so we have a lot of this potential that's not realizable in old systems like Ethereum, but is realizable on Ergo. And so that's why we're building a solid base of oracles going into DeFi. And then probably within 6 to 12 months, we're going to really start to see just what's possible that isn't possible anywhere else. And so that's why we're putting in a lot of time and effort researching on creating a solid base so that in 8 months, we don't have people complaining, the sky is falling because we screwed up and someone sold out and, the oracles are failing. But we're actually starting from zero, creating the infrastructure we need, and then receiving the fruits of our labor, so to speak, once we can build everything on top.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That sounds very, very amazing. That level of quality of DeFi and with the privacy as well, which I think is so important. Robert, is there anything else you want to let us know before we finish up?
So if anyone's interested, To learn more about Oracle pools, you can go check out the Ergo Explorer. You can just search that on Google. We have a really great front end that was made by one of the devs from the core team that visually shows you the current Oracle pools that are available, the epics that they're in, how everything's structured, and it's very visual and very easy for anyone to read and enjoy. Otherwise, if you're more technical, you can go on GitHub and search for Emurgo Research, and that's our research repo that has a bunch of our papers, write-ups, and other research that we do about Oracle pools. We have 2 write-ups there, and we have a bunch of other stuff for Ergo, for Cardano as well. And so if you're interested, now is the time to jump into all of this. We're getting some of the core infrastructure set up, and so if you're technically competent, and if you want to explore a whole new system, a whole new way of writing smart contracts that was never possible before, jump on in, search Ergo platform on Google, come join the Telegram, come join the Discord, and get started today. We're very welcoming, and so just please come in. I think you won't regret it because this is a really exciting time, and we're just at the first slope where we're going to really start to see the fruits of all of our labors. And so please feel free to come in, enjoy, and maybe we can really build something that was not possible before in old systems like Ethereum. But if you never try it out for yourself, you don't know what you'll miss.
Thank you. And I'm going to have all the links in the description below. And if you're technical, do as Robert said. And if you're not technical, you should join anyway and check out this project. Join the Telegram group, ask questions. Any questions and comments, I would appreciate them in the description below. And between Robert, thank you so much. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with crypto profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Robert signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.